The Valori Empire had spent 10,000 years building the most complete record of life in the galaxy. Every species, every fleet, every planet with so much as a breathing creature on it, all of it was logged, measured, and given a number. The Great Archive sat at the heart of the Imperial Command Station, a machine so vast it filled an entire moon. It held the names of civilizations that had risen and fallen before humans had even learned to make fire. And in all those thousands of years, across all those billions of entries, the archive had never once been wrong. Archivist Polam was proud of this. He had served the archive for 40 years, and he believed in it the way some beings believed in gods. Every morning he walked through the glowing corridors of data, running his long fingers over the light screens, checking and rechecking. He knew the classification of every known species by heart. The Velith were Tier 7, peaceful traders, no military value. The Dranak were Tier 2, dangerously advanced, best avoided. And the humans? Polam smiled whenever he passed their file. Tier 4, moderate nuisance. They were aggressive, yes, and strangely stubborn, but their technology was decades behind the Empire. They were loud, messy, and their ships leaked radiation like broken containers. Nothing to worry about. On the bridge of the command station, Overlord Dren sat in his chair and watched the stars. He was old for a Valori, nearly 200, and he had fought in wars that most of his officers had only read about. His skin was the color of wet stone, his eyes narrow and yellow, and when he spoke, the room went quiet. He was not cruel, but he was not kind either. He was simply in charge, and everyone knew it. Sub-Commander Ilkith stood beside him, holding a datapad. Overlord, he said, the humans have jumped a fleet into the Pallid Reach. Dren did not move. Which fleet? Their 9th Expeditionary, 38 ships, led by one of their admirals, a man named Kang Do-hyun. Dren made a small sound, something between a laugh and a grunt. The Pallid Reach was a dead zone. The Empire had abandoned it 3 centuries ago after stripping it of every useful resource. There was nothing there but dust and silence. What do they want with it? Survey mission, most likely. Resource mapping. They've been expanding their relay network along the outer rim. Let them play, Dren said. He waved one hand lazily. Deploy long-range drones. I want to watch. Ilkith nodded and left. Within the hour, a chain of invisible surveillance drones slipped through fold space and took up positions around the Pallid Reach. Their lenses pointed at the small, ugly ships of the human fleet. Far away, in the cold black of the Pallid Reach, Admiral Kang Do-hyun stood on the bridge of the Guangedo and looked at nothing. The space around them was empty in a way that felt wrong. Not just empty of ships or stations, but empty of everything. No background radiation worth measuring. No asteroid drift, no signal noise. It was like the universe had forgotten this place existed. Do-hyun was a tall man with a square jaw and calm eyes. He kept his hair short and his uniform clean, and he spoke in a voice that never seemed to rise, even when things went bad. His officers respected him not because he was loud or inspiring, but because he was steady. In a crisis, Do-hyun did not panic. He simply fought faster. All ships report ready, Admiral, said Lieutenant No Taewon from the tactical station. Taewon was young, sharp, and a little too eager, but Do-hyun liked him. He reminded Do-hyun of himself 20 years ago, before the wars had taught him patience. Good. Begin survey pattern. Standard spread, 10,000-kilometer intervals. 38 ships. Destroyers, frigates, 2 cruisers, and the flagship, moving in a wide net, their sensors reaching out like fingers into the void. At the front of the formation, Captain Yoon Jisoo commanded the destroyer Baekdu and her vanguard group. Jisoo was 34, compact and fierce, with a reputation for making decisions faster than most people could finish a sentence. She had served under Do-hyun for 6 years, and he trusted her more than anyone in the fleet. She was the tip of the spear, and she liked it that way. Anything on sensors? She asked her bridge crew. Nothing, Captain. Clean space in every direction. Jisoo frowned. She did not like clean space. In her experience, when sensors showed nothing at all, it usually meant they were missing something. Below the bridge of the Guangato, in the science section, Dr. Shin Unji was staring at her screens with the look of someone who had found a thread and was about to pull it. Unji was the fleet's xenobiologist and intelligence analyst, a quiet woman with sharp eyes and a habit of muttering to herself when she was thinking. She had noticed something in the background readings. Not a signal exactly, more like an absence of a signal. A pattern in the silence, like the shape left behind when something moves through water. She flagged it and sent a note to the bridge. Do-hyun read it, considered it, and filed it away. They would keep watching. Back on the Valori command station, Overlord Dren had invited a handful of senior officers to watch the drone feed. It was entertainment mostly. They sat in comfortable chairs and watched the human ships crawl through empty space, placing their little beacons and scanning their little rocks. Polam was there too, sitting in the back with his datapad, ready to answer any questions about the humans. He had prepared notes. The first hour was boring. The second hour was the same. Then, halfway through the third hour, something happened on the feed. The frigate at the far edge of the human formation, a small ship called Chungmu, simply stopped existing. There was no flash of light, no explosion, no cloud of debris spinning into the void. One frame it was there, engines glowing, crew alive, systems running. The next frame, it was gone. Just gone. As if someone had reached into reality and pulled it out like a loose thread. The room went silent. Dren sat up straight. Ilgeth grabbed the console and replayed the footage 3 times, slowing it down to individual frames. It was the same every time. The ship was there, and then it was not. What did that? Dren asked. His voice was quiet now. Ilgeth looked at Polam. Polam was already searching, his fingers flying across the datapad, pulling records, cross-referencing energy signatures, running the footage through every filter the archive had. He searched for 10 minutes, 20, 30. The room waited. Finally, Polam looked up. His face had changed. The color had drained from it, and his hands were shaking in a way that Dren had never seen before. Well, Dren said. Polam swallowed. There is no match, Overlord. No species, no weapon, no phenomenon. In 10,000 years of records, nothing. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. They are not in our logs. The room felt colder. On the screen, the human fleet was still moving, unaware that the Valori were watching, unaware that something in the darkness had just reached out and swallowed one of their ships whole, and that the oldest, most complete archive in the galaxy had no idea what it was. The bridge of the Guangato erupted into noise the moment the Chungmu vanished. Alarms screamed. Officers shouted over each other. Screens flickered with error messages as the fleet's network tried to reconnect with a ship that no longer existed. Lieutenant No Taewan's hands moved across his console so fast they blurred, pulling up sensor data, scanning for debris, searching for any sign, a heat trace, a metal fragment, anything at all. There was nothing. Admiral Kang Do-han stood at the center of it all and said nothing for a long moment. He watched the empty space where the Chungmu had been. 206 crew, gone in less than a second. No warning, no chance to fight. He let the noise wash over him, and then he raised one hand, and the bridge went quiet. All ships, defensive formation, tighten the spread. I want every sensor at maximum range. No one moves alone. The fleet pulled inward, like a fist closing. 37 ships now, circling each other, their weapons hot, and their crews staring into the dark with wide eyes. Nobody knew what they were looking for. Captain Yoon Ji-soo was the first to report something. Her destroyer Baekdu was running at the front of the formation, and her sensor officer had picked up a visual distortion, a patch of space where the stars behind it seemed to bend and stretch, like heat rising from a road. It was faint. If you were not looking for it, you would never see it. "Admiral, I have something," Jisoo said over the fleet channel. Her voice was flat and controlled, the way it always was when things were bad. "Bearing 270, distance 40,000 kilometers. Space is folding. I do not know how else to describe it." Do-hyun looked at Taewon. "Can you confirm?" Taewon ran the scan twice. "Confirmed. The distortion is real. It is not gravitational. It is not thermal. I have no classification for it." "Put it on screen." The main display shifted, and there it was, a patch of darkness that was slightly wrong, like a wrinkle in a bedsheet. It moved slowly, drifting through the void, with no engine trail and no energy signature. It was there, and at the same time, it felt like it was not entirely there, like it was pressing through from somewhere else. Down in the science section, Dr. Shin Eun-ji had not slept in 3 hours and had no plans to start. She was surrounded by screens, each one showing a different analysis of the moment the Chungmu had disappeared. She had slowed the footage to 1,000th of a second per frame and found something that made her stomach turn. In the last frame before the ship vanished, the hull had not been destroyed. It had been folded. The metal had bent inward on itself, like paper being crumpled, and then it was simply not there anymore. Whatever had taken the ship had not blown it up. It had collapsed it into nothing. She sent her findings to the bridge. Do-hyun read them, and his jaw tightened. "Eun-ji," he said over the internal channel, "what are we dealing with?" "Something that can manipulate the structure of space itself," she said. "It folded the Chungmu out of existence. I believe the distortions Captain Yoon is seeing are the same kind of event. Something pushing through from outside normal space-time, like a hand pressing through a curtain. Can we fight it? I do not know yet." Before Do-hyun could respond, the second ship disappeared, the frigate Hansando, port side of the formation. Same thing, a ripple, a fold, and then empty space where a ship and 180 crew had been. The fleet channel filled with screaming. Do-hyun killed the chatter with a single command and ordered silence. Then the third ship went. The corvette Miryang, 90 crew, gone. 476 people. And the enemy had not shown itself once. The fear was spreading now. Do-hyun could feel it in the silence between his officers, in the way their eyes moved too quickly, in the slight tremor in Taewon's voice when he read out the sensor reports. Some of the ship captains were calling for retreat. Commander Park on the cruiser Incheon said it plainly. "Admiral, we are being hunted by something we cannot see, cannot track, and cannot fight. We need to jump out, now." Do-hyun listened to all of them. Then he said, "No, we stay. Eun-ji needs more data. If we run now, we learn nothing, and the next fleet that comes here dies the same way." The channel went quiet. Nobody argued with Do-hyun when he used that tone. Far away, on the Valori command station, the entertainment was over. The comfortable chairs were empty. Overlord Dren was standing now, his yellow eyes fixed on the drone feed. His hands clasped behind his back so tightly, his knuckles had turned white. Sub-Commander Ilkath stood beside him, and for the first time in his long career, Ilkath had no advice to offer. They had watched 3 human ships disappear. They had seen the distortions, and they had run every scan, every analysis, every search that their technology allowed. Nothing. Ilkath turned to Archivist Palom, who was sitting in the corner, still searching. The old archivist had pulled records from the deepest layers of the archive, files that had not been opened in millennia, entries written in languages that no living Valori could read. He had searched myths. He had searched legends. He had searched the classified files that even Dren was not supposed to know about. Every result was the same. Empty. Blank. No match found. In 10,000 years, Polam said, his voice thin and hollow, we have logged 412 spacefaring species. We have recorded 9,007 unique weapon systems. We have cataloged every known spatial phenomenon from black holes to fold space tears. He looked up at Dren. This is none of those things. This is something we have never seen. Something that has never appeared anywhere, in any record, in any archive in the known galaxy. Dren felt something he had not felt in decades. It started in his chest and spread outward, cold and heavy. Fear. Not fear of the humans. He understood humans. They were predictable in their chaos. This was a different kind of fear. This was the fear of a man who had believed the map was complete, only to discover that the map had a hole in it, and something was living in that hole. If it is not in our logs, Dren said slowly, then it predates our logs. The room was silent. On the Guangato, Dr. Shin Unji made a discovery that changed everything. Buried in the electromagnetic noise of the distortions, hidden beneath layers of radiation and static, there was a signal. Not a random signal, a structured one, a transmission. It was embedded in the fabric of the distortions themselves, as if the things out there were not just folding space, they were speaking through it. She isolated the signal and ran it through every translation matrix the fleet carried. Most returned garbage, but one, an ancient linguistic database that the Terran Archaeology Corps had recovered from a dead civilization near the galactic core, produced a partial match. The structure was old. Older than the Valori Empire. Older than most of the stars in this part of the galaxy. Unji worked for 2 hours, cross-referencing and rebuilding the pattern, filling in gaps with probability models. When she was done, she had a single phrase. She stared at it for a long time. Then she called the bridge. Admiral, she said, I have translated the signal. What does it say? Unji read it aloud, and the bridge went cold. You are remembered. You should not have come back. Dohan stood very still. Around him his officers exchanged looks. Taewan's hand had frozen above his console. On the screen, the distortions drifted through the darkness like ghosts. Come back, Dohan repeated quietly. That means something was here before. Something came here, and something remembers. He turned to the stars. Out there, in the folds of broken space, something ancient was watching them, and it was hungry. 7 ships were gone now. 7 ships and over 1,000 souls, swallowed by something that had no name, no shape, and no place in any record ever written. The fleet was down to 31, and every crew member aboard every remaining vessel knew the truth. They were being eaten alive, and they could not even see what was doing it. On the bridge of the Guangato, Admiral Kang Do-yoon stood with his hands behind his back and listened to his officers argue. Commander Park on the Incheon had stopped asking politely and was now demanding retreat. 2 other captains had joined him. Their reasoning was simple and hard to argue with. The enemy was invisible, untouchable, and apparently unstoppable. Every minute they stayed was another minute closer to losing another ship. The smart thing to do, the rational thing, was to jump out, report to command, and let someone else figure this out. He let them say everything they needed to say. Then he spoke, and his voice was the same as it always was, steady, low, and absolutely certain. If we leave now, we take nothing with us except fear. We will tell command that something in the pallid reach can erase ships from existence, and we will have no data on what it is, how it works, or how to stop it. Command will send another fleet. That fleet will die the same way, and the fleet after that. We are here now. We have lost people. We owe them an answer. The channel was silent. Then Captain Yoon Ji-soo spoke from the Baekdu. I am with the Admiral. That settled it. Nobody wanted to be the one who argued after Jisoo sided with Do-hyun. Do-hyun turned to Taewon. "Lieutenant, pull up Protocol Yangdong." Taewon blinked. He knew the name. Every officer in the Terran Navy knew it. The way you know the name of a weapon you hope you never have to use. Protocol Yangdong was a contingency doctrine written for a specific nightmare. An enemy that could not be seen, could not be tracked, and could not be understood. It had been designed by a committee of strategists, psychologists, and combat veterans who had asked themselves one question. What do you do when you are fighting in the dark against something you cannot comprehend? The answer was very human. You make so much noise that the darkness has no choice but to look at you. Do-hyun opened the fleet channel and gave his orders. Every ship was to overload their reactor shielding and vent raw energy into open space. The process was dangerous. It would cook the outer hull and reduce their effective armor by half. But it would turn every vessel into a blazing torch of radiation visible across half the sector. The idea was to become impossible to ignore. "If these things hunt in the dark," Do-hyun said, "then we take the dark away." Across the fleet, engineers swore and prayed as they ripped safety limiters off reactor cores and opened the venting systems. Within 20 minutes, 31 human ships burned like stars, pouring light and heat into the void. The pallid reach, which had been silent and black for centuries, was suddenly on fire. Then came the second part of the plan. Sergeant Bae Sun-ho and his Marine team suited up in deep space combat armor and launched from the cruisers in open pods, tiny one-person capsules with no weapons, no engines, and no protection except the suit on their backs. Each pod carried a high-sensitivity sensor array. The Marines would float in the gaps between ships, acting as a living detection net, their bodies serving as bait and their sensors feeding data directly to Dr. Shin Eun-ji's lab. Sun-ho was a big man with a wide face and scarred hands. He had fought on 3 different worlds and had been shot twice. None of that had scared him as much as climbing into a pod the size of a coffin and floating alone in the dark while invisible things ate ships around him. But he did it anyway, because Do-hyun asked, and because Sun-ho trusted Do-hyun the way a soldier trusts the one person who has never lied to him. "All pods deployed," Sun-ho reported. His voice was calm, but Do-hyun could hear the tight edge underneath. "Sensors are live. We are your eyes, Admiral." On the Valori command station, Overlord Dren watched the feed and could not believe what he was seeing. The humans had lost 7 ships to an invisible enemy, and instead of running, they had set themselves on fire and thrown their soldiers into open space. He turned to Ilketh, looking for some explanation, some rational framework to put this behavior in. Ilketh had none. "They are charging toward it," he said. His voice was hollow. "They are charging toward the thing that is killing them." Captain Yoon Ji-soo took her destroyer group, 4 ships, and accelerated directly toward the largest distortion. The ripple in space was bigger now, almost visible to the naked eye, a dark smear against the stars that moved with a slow, terrible purpose. Jisoo pushed the Baekdu to full speed, her reactors screaming, her crew gripping their stations with white knuckles. "Captain," her first officer said, "if that thing takes us—" "Then Eun-ji gets more data," Jisoo said. "That is the mission." They hit the edge of the distortion zone. The first ship to go was the destroyer Tongyong. It folded inward like a crushed can and vanished. Jisoo felt the shockwave pass through her ship, a vibration that was not in the hull but in the air, in her teeth, in her bones. Then, the frigate Namhae went the same way, twisted and gone in half a second. But in that half second, the Baekdu sensors captured something. A burst of data, raw and chaotic, pulled from the instant between existence and nothing. The moment when the hollow, for that was what Eun-ji had started calling them, the things that lived in the hollow spaces between dimensions, reached through and took a ship. Jisoo pulled the Baekdu hard to port and ran, her engines redlined, her hull groaning. Behind her, the last ship in her group, the corvette Gosong, was taken. Jisoo made it out, barely. Her ship was damaged, her crew was shaken, and 2 of her sensor panels were fused into slag. But her data core was intact. She transmitted everything to Eunji. In the science lab of the Gwanggaedo, Dr. Shin Eunji received the data and went to work with the focus of someone who knew that every second mattered. She pulled the readings apart layer by layer, matching them against the signals she had already decoded and the visual distortion patterns she had been mapping for hours. And there it was, clear as a bell. The hollow were creatures of resonance. They existed at a specific dimensional frequency, a vibration that sat between normal space and whatever lay beyond it. They did not attack in the traditional sense. They collapsed matter by matching its frequency and pulling it out of phase with reality. The ships were not destroyed. They were unraveled, pulled apart at the atomic level, and absorbed. The hollow were not weapons. They were not soldiers. They were feeders, ancient, vast, and endlessly hungry. They had lived in the pallid reach for longer than the Valori Empire had existed, sleeping in the spaces between atoms, and the human fleet had woken them up. If you could generate a counter-frequency, a vibration that opposed the hollow's natural state, you could force them out of their dimensional hiding place and into normal space. You could make them solid. You could make them real. And if you could make them real, you could kill them. Yunji called the bridge. Her voice was shaking, not with fear, but with the wild energy of someone who had just found the answer. "Admiral," she said, "I know what they are, and I think I know how to fight them." Do-hyun listened. When she was done, he was quiet for a moment. Then, for the first time since the battle had begun, he smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a man who had been punched in the face and had just found a rock to swing back with. "Now we know what they are," he said. "Now we teach them what we are." Admiral Kang Do-hyun gave his engineers 4 hours. 4 hours to build something that had never been built before, using parts that were never meant for this purpose, on ships that were already damaged and burning half their energy into open space. The task was simple to describe and nearly impossible to do. Construct a counter-resonance generator powerful enough to force the hollow out of their dimensional hiding place and into real, physical space. Dr. Shin Eunji provided the frequency. Lieutenant No Taewon provided the targeting calculations. And the engineering crews across 26 remaining ships provided something that no equation could measure: the stubborn, furious refusal to die quietly. The problem was power. The counter-resonance needed more energy than any single ship could produce. Eunji ran the numbers 3 times and came back with the same answer each time. The only systems on board with enough output were the jump drives, the engines that folded space and allowed faster-than-light travel. To power the resonance generators, they would have to strip the jump drives completely. Every coil, every capacitor, every gram of fuel. Taewon was the first to say it out loud. "If we use the jump drives, we cannot leave." Do-hyun nodded. "I know. Admiral, that means there is no retreat. If this does not work, then we die here," Do-hyun said. "But we die knowing what they are, and we make sure that data gets out on every open channel before the last ship goes dark." He looked around the bridge at his officers. They were tired. They were scared. But they were still standing. "Anyone who wants to object has 30 seconds. Nobody spoke. Good. Begin the conversion." Across the fleet, engineers tore their jump drives apart with cutting tools and bare hands. Coils the size of cars were ripped from their housings and carried through corridors by teams of sweating, swearing crew members. Fuel lines were rerouted. Safety systems were bypassed. On the destroyer Baekdu, Captain Yoon Ji-soo personally helped her engineering team drag a resonance emitter into position on the forward hull, her boots slipping on the metal floor, her arms shaking from exhaustion. She had not slept in 20 hours. In the marine pods floating between the ships, Sergeant Bae Soon-ho and his team waited in the dark. They had been out there for 6 hours now, drifting in silence, watching the distortions move around them like slow-swimming predators. Soon-ho kept his breathing steady. He talked to his team on the short-range channel, telling bad jokes, asking about their families, keeping them human. A private named Cho Min-jae told him about his daughter back on Earth. She was 4 years old. Sun-ho listened and promised himself that Min-jae would see his daughter again. On the Valori command station, the atmosphere had changed completely. The viewing room was now a command center. Overlord Dren had called in every senior officer and analyst available. The drone feed played on the largest screen, showing the human fleet tearing itself apart and rebuilding in real time. Dren could not understand what he was watching. No species in the archive had ever done this, cannibalized their own escape capability to build a weapon against an enemy they had only just discovered. He turned to Archivist Polam. Pulled a full file on humans. Everything. Polam brought it up. It was thick. The humans had been studied extensively since their first contact with the wider galaxy. Dren listened as Polam read through the highlights. The wars, hundreds of them, spanning their entire history, fought against each other and against anyone else who came close. The famines, the plagues, the disasters, each one followed not by collapse, but by rebuilding. The space program that they had started by strapping themselves to controlled explosions and hoping for the best. The colony ships they had sent into the void with nothing but frozen food and optimism. And then there was the pattern that every Valori analyst had noted, but none had been able to explain. Humans did not run from danger. Not reliably. Not predictably. Other species, when faced with overwhelming force, would calculate the odds and withdraw. It was rational. It was sensible. It was what any intelligent being would do. But humans, again and again throughout their history, chose to stay. They chose to fight things bigger than them. They charged trenches. They held walls. They flew burning aircraft into enemy ships. Not because they were stupid. Their scientists and engineers were genuinely brilliant, but because something in them simply would not accept defeat. Dren listened to all of it. When Polam finished, the Overlord was quiet for a long time. Then, he said something that his officers would remember for the rest of their lives. Our classification system measures technology, fleet size, and resource capability. It does not measure will. That is the flaw. We have been measuring the wrong thing. In the Pallid Reach, the 4 hours were up. The fleet was ready. 26 ships, stripped of their jump drives, loaded with crude resonance generators, built from salvaged parts and desperate engineering. Do-hyun positioned the fleet in a sphere formation, every emitter pointed outward, and gave the order. All ships, activate counter-resonance on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. 26 generators fired at once. A wave of energy rolled outward from the fleet. A sound that was not a sound. A vibration that passed through metal and flesh and bone and kept going, pushing into the spaces between atoms, reaching into the folds of reality where the hollow lived. And space tore open. The distortions that had been drifting through the darkness like ghosts suddenly became real. They were vast, each one the size of a cruiser, some larger, and they were shaped in ways that the human mind struggled to process. Geometric forms of folded light and shadow, angles that seemed to turn in directions that did not exist, surfaces that reflected things that were not there. They were beautiful and terrible, ancient beyond comprehension, and they were screaming. The scream hit the fleet like a physical force. Glass shattered. Screens cracked. Every crew member on every ship grabbed their heads as the sound tore through them. Not through their ears, but through their cells. A vibration that went deeper than hearing. Blood ran from noses. 3 crew members on the Gwangaeto collapsed. but the generators held, and the hollow were visible. Do-hyun did not hesitate. All ships, weapons free, everything you have, fire. The fleet opened up with every weapon they carried. Railgun rounds streaked through the void. Missiles spiraled toward the glowing shapes. Energy beams cut lines of light across the darkness. The hollow twisted and writhed as the weapons struck them, not destroying them, but hurting them. For the first time in their ancient, endless existence, something was causing them pain. The hollow fought back. They folded space around the ships, crushing hulls, tearing vessels apart. The cruiser Incheon, Commander Park's ship, was twisted in half, its crew spilling into vacuum. 2 frigates buckled and collapsed. A destroyer lost its entire forward section and drifted, burning. In his pod, Sergeant Bae Soon-ho felt the resonance wave pass through him. His visor cracked. His suit alarm screamed. Through the fractured glass, he saw one of the hollow shapes turning toward the cluster of marine pods, and he understood what was about to happen. He switched to the fleet channel. "Admiral, it is Soon-ho. Get the pods out. Get them." The hollow folded the space around the pods. Soon-ho's transmission cut to static. Captain Yoon Ji-soo heard Soon-ho's voice cut out and felt something crack inside her chest, but she did not stop. She could not stop. The largest hollow entity was directly ahead of her. A towering shape of folded dimensions, bigger than anything else on the field. It was the source. Eunji had said that if they could wound the largest one, the others might scatter. Jisoo aimed the Baekdu directly at it and pushed to full speed. "Captain, what are you doing?" her first officer shouted. "My job," Jisoo said. She overloaded the Baekdu's reactor and set it to blow on impact. Then she hit the ejection command. Her bridge chair fired her capsule clear of the ship, a half-second before the Baekdu struck the hollow entity at full speed and detonated its reactor core point blank. The explosion was immense. A wound opened in the hollow, a tear in its impossible geometry, light pouring out of it like blood from a cut. The creature screamed again, and this time the scream was different. This time it was not rage, it was fear. The hollow pulled back, not slowly, not with dignity, but fast, folding themselves back into the spaces between dimensions, retreating into their hidden world. The distortions faded. The screaming stopped. The darkness of the pallid reach returned, but this time it was just darkness. Normal, empty, honest darkness. On the Valori command station, nobody moved. The feed showed the human fleet, what was left of it. 11 ships out of 38. All damaged, some barely holding together. Wreckage and debris drifted everywhere. Emergency beacons flashed in the dark. Ilketh turned to Dren. His voice was barely a whisper. "Overlord, should we update the humans' threat classification?" Dren stared at the screen for a very long time. Then he spoke. "Delete the old file. Start a new one." He paused. Tier 0. Nobody in the room had ever heard of Tier 0. It did not exist in the classification system. But from the look on Dren's face, it existed now. The silence after the battle was the worst part. Not because it was empty, but because it was full. Full of the things that should have been there and were not. 27 ships worth of engine noise, radio chatter, and beating hearts, all replaced by nothing. Admiral Kang Do-hyun stood on the bridge of the Gwanggaeto and stared at the field of wreckage that drifted past his windows. Pieces of hull plating turned slowly in the void. A chair from someone's quarters floated by, still bolted to a section of floor. Emergency beacons blinked in the darkness like dying fireflies. He was injured. A piece of shrapnel from a ruptured console had cut his left arm from elbow to wrist, and the ship's medic had wrapped it quickly, but the blood was already soaking through the bandage. Do-hyun did not look at it. He had work to do. "Taewon," he said, "how many pods are still transmitting?" Lieutenant No Taewon's face was pale and streaked with grime. He had not left his station in over 12 hours. His fingers moved across the console, and with each number he read, his voice got a little quieter. 47 escape pods detected, Admiral. 18 marine capsules. Total confirmed survivors across all recovered vessels, 1,311. He paused. 2,214 are unaccounted for. Do-hyun closed his eyes for 1 second, then he opened them. Begin recovery operations. Every pod, every capsule, every piece of wreckage large enough to hold a body. We do not leave anyone behind. The 11 surviving ships spread out through the debris field. Their crews worked in shifts, pulling pods from the void with tractor beams and mechanical arms, cutting open jammed hatches, carrying the wounded through airlocks. Some of the pods were intact. Some were cracked open, their occupants already dead from vacuum exposure. Each one was brought aboard. Each one was counted. It was the crew of the frigate Wonju that found her. Captain Yoon Ji-soo's ejection capsule was tumbling end over end near the spot where the Baekdu had detonated. The capsule was crushed on one side, its hull blackened by the reactor blast that had come a half-second after she ejected. When they cut it open, the medics expected to find a body. Instead, they found Jisoo, alive, barely. Her left arm was broken in 2 places. Her ribs were cracked. Burns covered her shoulders and the left side of her face. The capsule's emergency medical system had pumped her full of painkillers and sealed her suit to keep the pressure stable. And she had been drifting in and out of consciousness the 3 hours, alone in the dark, not knowing if the fleet had survived. When they carried her aboard the Gwangaeto, Do-hyun was waiting at the airlock. He looked down at her, and for one moment, his steady, controlled expression cracked. Just a little. Just enough for Jisoo to see it. She looked up at him through glassy eyes and said, "Did we get the data?" Do-hyun nodded. "We got it." Jisoo closed her eyes and smiled. Then the medics took her away. In the science lab, Dr. Shin Eun-ji had compiled everything. Every scan, every reading, every piece of sensor data from every ship that had lived long enough to transmit. She had built a complete profile of the Hollow, their dimensional frequency, their physical structure when forced into normal space, their feeding mechanism, their vulnerability to counter-resonance. It was the most detailed intelligence ever gathered on a species that no one in the galaxy had even known existed. Do-hyun came to the lab and stood beside her. "Is it ready?" "It is ready." "Send it." Eun-ji looked at him. "To command?" "To everyone." She opened the fleet's long-range communication array and set it to broadcast on every frequency. Military, civilian, commercial, alien. Every species in range would receive the data. Every government, every archive, every ship with a working antenna would know what the Hollow were and how to fight them. Do-hyun recorded a message to accompany the transmission. He sat in front of the camera, his arm bandaged, his face drawn with exhaustion, and he spoke plainly. "This is Admiral Kang Do-hyun of the Terran 9th Expeditionary Fleet. We entered the Pallid Reach 11 hours ago with 38 ships. We encountered a hostile entity with no record in any known database. We have lost 27 ships and over 2,000 crew. The entity is real. It feeds on matter by collapsing dimensional resonance. Attached to this transmission is complete intelligence on the entity's frequency, structure, and vulnerability. Use it. To all ships and stations receiving this, these things hunt in the dark. Now you can see them. You are welcome." The transmission went out. It crossed the Pallid Reach and hit the nearest relay beacon, then jumped from beacon to beacon across the sector, spreading outward like a wave. On the Valori command station, Archivist Polam received it. He read it 3 times, not because he did not understand it, but because he could not believe it. The humans had taken everything they had learned, paid for in blood and ships and lives, and given it away, for free, to everyone. including the Valori Empire, which had sat in comfortable chairs and watched them die. Subcommander Ilketh brought the transmission to Overlord Dren. Dren read it in silence, then set the datapad down on his desk and sat for a long time without speaking. "They gave it to us," Ilketh said. "They did not have to." "No," Dren said. "They did not." The Valori Imperial Senate convened an emergency session that same day. The chamber was chaos. Senator Vren of the Military Council demanded an immediate alliance with humanity. Senator Kothan of the Security Council demanded the opposite. The humans were too dangerous, too unpredictable, and their reckless behavior in the Pallid Reach proved that they were a threat to galactic stability. Others argued that the real threat was the Hollow, and that everything else was secondary. Dren listened to them all. He let them shout and point and pound their desks. Then he stood, and the chamber fell silent. "I have spent 200 years serving this empire," he said. "I have fought wars against species that could crack planets and drain stars. I have never recommended that we avoid conflict with any of them. Today I am telling you, do not go to war with Earth." Dren continued. "The humans are not the most advanced species we have encountered. Their technology is decades behind ours in most areas. Their ships are crude. Their tactics are aggressive to the point of recklessness. But in the Pallid Reach, they met something that the entire Valori Empire, with all its archives, all its fleets, all its 10,000 years of knowledge, did not even know existed. They lost more than half their number, and their response was not to flee. Their response was to tear apart their own ships, remove their only means of escape, and build a weapon from the wreckage. They attacked something that had been eating them alive, and they made it run." He let that sit in the silence. Any species can fight when the odds are in their favor. Any species can show courage when victory is likely. What the humans showed in the Pallid Reach was something else. They showed that they will fight when the odds are impossible, when retreat is the only sane option, when the enemy is beyond comprehension. They will fight, and they will keep fighting, and they will spend their last breath making sure that the next person who comes along has a better chance than they did. That is not a species you go to war with. That is a species you stand beside, or stay far away from. There is no middle ground. The Senate voted. The motion to classify humanity as a strategic threat was defeated. The motion to open diplomatic channels with Earth was passed by a wide margin. In the Pallid Reach, the 11 surviving ships of the 9th Expeditionary Fleet prepared to go home. Without jump drives, they would have to travel at sublight speed to the nearest Allied station, a journey of several weeks. The crews did not complain. They were alive, and that was enough. Sergeant Bae Sun-ho's name was added to the casualty list. He and 14 of his Marines had been killed when the Hollow collapsed their pod cluster. Private Cho Min-jae, the young man who had talked about his daughter and her love of dinosaurs, was among the survivors. He had been in a pod at the edge of the cluster, just far enough out to escape the fold. He did not speak for 2 days after being recovered. Do-hyun visited Jisoo in the medical bay. She was sitting up, her arm in a splint, her burns treated and bandaged. She looked terrible and alive. "Do you think they will come back?" she asked. Do-hyun looked out the medical bay window at the stars. The Pallid Reach was quiet now, just dust and dark and the slow tumble of wreckage. But somewhere out there, in the spaces between atoms, the Hollow were still alive. They had retreated, but they had not been destroyed. They were old and patient, and one day they would be hungry again. "They will come back," he said. "And we will be ready?" Do-hyun turned to her. His arm was still bandaged. His eyes were tired. But somewhere behind the exhaustion, there was something that had not gone out. A light that burned low and steady, the kind that does not flicker even in the worst wind. "We will be louder," he said. Far away, on the Valori command station, Archivist Polam sat alone in the archive. The glowing corridors were quiet. The data screens hummed softly around him. He had a new file open, the updated entry on humanity. The old classification, Tier 4, Moderate Nuisance, had been permanently erased. In its place was something that Polam had never written before, for any species in his entire career. He typed slowly, choosing each word with the care of a man who understood that what he wrote today would be read for the next 10,000 years. Species, human, Homo sapiens. Classification, Tier 0. Threat assessment, unlimited. Strategic recommendation, do not engage, do not provoke, do not assume they will behave rationally. He paused. His fingers hovered over the keys. Then he added a personal note at the bottom, something that was not standard, something that would probably get him a reprimand from his superiors. He did not care. Some things needed to be said. Note from Archivist Polam, they were not in our logs. The hollow, the ancient things that lived in the dark spaces of the Pallid Reach. We did not know they existed. In 10,000 years of record-keeping, we never found them. The humans found them in 11 hours. And when the hollow tried to eat them, the humans bit back. They tore apart their own fleet to build weapons. They threw their bodies into the void as bait. They flew their ships into the mouth of something older than our empire and detonated themselves rather than retreat. And when it was over, they gave us everything they had learned. They owed us nothing. We had done nothing to help them. But they sent the data anyway, because that is what humans do. They fight, and then they share what they have learned, so that the next person to face the darkness has a better chance. I do not know what this species will become. I do not know if they will be our allies or our enemies. But I know this, whatever comes out of the dark next, I hope the humans are still out there, because they are the only ones who will run toward it. He saved the file. The archive accepted it, and the entry on humanity joined the 10,000 years of records that had come before it. But it sat differently now. It sat at the top. Polam turned off his screen and sat in the dark for a long time, thinking about a species that lived on a small blue planet at the edge of the galaxy, and had somehow decided that the proper response to being eaten alive by something incomprehensible was to get angry about it. He did not understand them. He was not sure anyone ever would. But for the first time in 40 years of service to the archive, Archivist Polam was grateful for a gap in the records. Because the gap had brought the humans, and the humans had brought something the archive could never contain. Hope, stubborn, bleeding, furious hope. The kind that does not wait for permission, the kind that does not check the odds, the kind that looks into the dark and says simply and without hesitation, "Come and try."